Well, the name of this national park sounds like something you might spread on a corn chip.
That's guacamole.
Not guacamole, I mean Guadalupe Mountains National Park. That's what it is. And it contains maybe 7 of the 9 highest peaks in Texas, including El Capitan, which is on the southern border. But this park is primarily known for its hiking and physical activity. But we're going to check it out anyway. It's also a relatively new park, born in 1972, and so we're going to go take a look and see what we can learn more about it, and we'll let you know. Well, Debbie and I headed north on Highway 62, so we approached Guadalupe from the south. It was a beautiful drive looking at the mountains, and along the way we happened to see a pronghorn running beside us. I didn't want to scare it, but it turns out this is the fastest land animal in North America. It can run up to 60 miles an hour. We finally got past that and just continued on. In the distance we approached El Capitan, the southernmost part of the Guadalupe Mountains National Park, and we stood here just a little while just to look at the view before we headed to the Pine Springs Visitor Center. This is the main visitor center of the park, so we decided to stop here, get all our information, see what kind of trails we wanted to hike, and see what they had there. At this main visitor center, you can pay your entrance fees and camping fees if you're going to camp anywhere in the park, and you can just tour the museum and purchase items from the park store, or just pick up brochures and maps, and you get your overnight wilderness use permits here as well. But we're going to go inside. It's built pretty much like all the visitor centers. The restrooms are on the outside, and inside is the displays with stuffed animals and more information about the park, the wildlife, the geology. And we went in here to actually ask the rangers what we should do. And they were very, very helpful, and suggested a lot of the trails that are kind of based on our age, a little bit easier to moderate trails. So it was valuable information, and I advised going there to talk to them. But we just took a look around, looked at the models that they had there. If you look up on a map, you could probably see it better, but we're sort of tucked into the visitor center here in the corner. El Capitan is there on the end, and there's some trails here. Although we didn't walk on those, we decided to go up to the next place. But anyway, we just looked around, read the exhibits, read the signs, just to learn more and understand about this park. It's very interesting in geology. Okay, we figured out what to do. A couple of trails and places to go. Outside this visitor center, they've got just little areas to sit in the shade and look at the views, the mountains around, but we're going to head up to a couple of other trails that they gave us information on. Do a little short, easy hike, and then on up to the canyon to see the mouth of the canyon. Just another place, another visitor center that has a video about the man that actually owned all of this property and donated it to form the park in 1972. So we're going to see that movie at the next visitor center and do a hike there as well. What's different and unusual about this particular park and these mountains is they're not made out of granite like the Rocky Mountains and others. This was all under the ocean, so what happened is when the mountains rose up, the coral reef was exposed. So you can explore all these coral reefs, and the water has eroded down through them, creating these beautiful canyons with all this wildlife and springs in it. We drove up the road just a few miles to the Frijole Ranch. This is where the park recommended that we come to hike the trail, and we're so glad we did. So we're going to stop here a minute. We decided to come up here. The park recommended us for something a little bit easy to see this Frijole Ranch. It's just about a mile from the visitor center that we were just at, and we're going to see where this rancher lived, and then we're going to take the Smith Spring Trail, which is close by too. They said that's just an easy trail to walk around, and it gives us a little more idea of the park before we head up to the next visitor center. This is really a pretty neat place. The first substantial structure, that rock building you see there, was built by the Radar brothers in 1876. And they were like two bachelor brothers that ran a cattle ranch out of here in this rock home. And it was constructed about 40 feet from the springs that they had there. Water back then was everything. And they built this little building around the springs where they kept everything cold, and out of that ran a little trough of water that ran through the gardens. They could get dip water from there. And in 1906, John Thomas Smith moved in here. It was a vacant land in the Frijole side area, and he stayed in the house, and he called it his property until 1912. And they came from Wisconsin to Texas here. And later, they expanded the house a little bit in the 1920s and added like a rear kitchen and 2 more bedrooms and a second story and some dormers and things like that. I mean, this is really awesome. I mean, this is over 100 years old, this well that's still full of water, still running, still cold. Over the years, apples, peaches, apricots, plums, pears, figs, pecans, blackberries, strawberries, currants, and corn, and everything was grown here. Because see, the springs provided more than enough water that they needed, and the water was precious out here. The Smiths would travel about 65 miles south to Van Horn, and that's where they would sell their fruit and everything. And they also raised cattle and horses and pigs and chickens and things like that to work on the farm. You know, there was a lot of history here, and this Frijole Ranch served as like a community center. They had dances here, social gatherings. They had the region's official post office here from 1916 to 1942. Even though it wasn't built until 1950, the present-day barn complements other buildings and its wood frame construction. Can you imagine just raising all 10 of your kids out here in this area and how busy it would be? And the dinner bell rings and everybody comes in here, and how busy inside it must have been, this little room. This little red building that we're coming up on was called the Red Schoolhouse. I mean, the Smiths had like 10 kids, so they built this red schoolhouse that has vertical wood siding and a low-pitched roof, and up to 8 children from the Smith family and local ranches once attended this school there. The Smiths provided the room and board and a horse, in addition to $30 a month salary for the teacher. Later, the schoolhouse served as a storage shed and a bunkhouse for the ranchers. It was just easier to hire a teacher and bring them here than it was to send your kids all the way to town to school. Well, it's time to head off to the trails now, and our first stop is going to be the Manzanita Spring. This is actually the beginning of the Smith Spring Trail Loop, but you see just beautiful flowers along the way, cactus that are beginning to bloom, beautiful blue flowers, prickly pear. And this Manzanita Spring is only about a half a mile out. You see little lizards. I mean, look how well camouflaged this lizard is. This spring, since it's flat, just forms a wide pool, and it's just crystal clear. And in an arid region like this, remember, this is going to attract a lot of wildlife, so it's good for bird watching and other creatures, animals, mule deers, elk, and a lot of variety of wildlife. Okay, we cut out from Manzanita Spring and started heading around the Smith Spring Trail Loop. This is a beautiful, beautiful walk, and I highly recommend doing this. But I don't think it matters which way you go around the trail, but we took the lower end from Manzanita Springs on around from there. The trail is rated moderate with a round trip distance of about 2.3, 2.4 miles, and you need to allow 1 to 2 hours. And it was just incredible. We really enjoyed this trail, and it wasn't too difficult for us. You'd stop along the way, just take your time. We'd look over the washout areas, it's called, but this is all coral reef and unique limestone formations. You can see it down there, but the ranch is down there at the bottom of just at the base of the mountain in the background. And we've made it this far up here. It's about up through this canyon. We're going to continue up this into the mountain, into the canyon to see the waterfall. And then it winds back down along the mountain, back down to the ranch. Fantastic walk. As we hike further into the canyon, things begin to change. It becomes more and more beautiful. It's like we're going to cross the washout and keep going up. As we get closer to Smith Spring, you suddenly begin to see little pools of water. and it becomes a completely different climate. It's cooler, it's beautiful, there's ferns growing, there's maple trees, and all of the things that you would never expect in the desert. It's just an oasis that's just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. We would highly recommend you coming here and just sitting down and quietly listening. Time to head back down. That was one of the most beautiful spots we've seen. The Smith Spring.
Very refreshing.
Oh, look at that. What is that? There's just all kind of stuff here that I've never seen before. Headed back down the trail. I was reading in the pamphlet that we just came down from Smith Spring down this canyon, but the Apache Indians just camped all around down here in the base because they got the water source, but they camped below it just to keep from contaminating the spring. That's just an interesting fact, but just imagine this whole valley filled with Apaches. One of my favorite parts of the trail was, of course, the flowers. They're just phenomenal, and there's so many varieties, and they're just everywhere. I just couldn't stop taking pictures and stop looking at them. Just a beautiful, beautiful trail. And that's what you do here at Guadalupe Mountains National Park. You hike the trails, and you're rewarded with just this beautiful scenery. Still headed down. Oh yeah, it is. This is the green rock. I don't know if you can tell how green it is. On this side, pieces of it. Here's some right here. Can you tell how green that is? This was a volcanic ash from millions of years ago. The pamphlet said that fell into the ocean. All of this was underwater, and this ash fell into the ocean, settled here, grew algae on it, and has just come to the surface again. So that's actually pretty interesting. A camera just really doesn't do this justice. I mean, even the far distance landscape is beautiful, but the colors are just phenomenal. Just beautiful scenery. The flowers are just beautiful. Here. Yellow flowers, purple flowers, some kind of little bush with purple flowers, red flowers, yellow flowers, flowering shrubs. We are just walking through a field of these beautiful wildflowers everywhere. Look at that. Oh, I hope you can see that. Well, we made it back to the Frijole ranch. Started there, went all the way up around the canyon, deep into the canyon to the spring, and just ended up back down here. And let me tell you what, the Smith Spring Trail is the one to do. You've got to go on that. The wildflowers are just incredible. And of course, it may depend on the time of year, but for us, it was the perfect timing. A little windy, I've got my hat strapped down, but I couldn't stop taking pictures of the flowers. And when you get to the spring, it is just phenomenal. It's just beautiful, cool, crystal clear water. And so I could understand how great a place this would have been to be and to live, actually. So this ranch was what it's all about. So we're gonna head back to the car and go up to the next visitor center, and we'll see you there. We just left the Pine Spring Visitor Center and headed about 10 miles north up to the the McKittrick Canyon Visitor Center. This is our second visitor center we've been to. The first one was the one we had the Smith Spring Trail hike that we went on that was just phenomenal. The park ranger recommended coming here to see this visitor center focuses on how the park was born. They have a small video that just talks about the man who owned this land and donated for park property. So we're going to go here and look at the displays and see what we can find out here. Maybe walk a little trail here to a nature trail, something simple, at the McKittrick Canyon Visitor Center. So let's go inside. Well, as it turns out, the visitor center here, the video is really outside. It's a small video that describes a little more about the park, but it's still worth watching. So I'd recommend that, and then if you want to hike the trail, you can. There's certainly restrooms to use, and it's a good little stop along the way. Well, after watching the video, it's actually very interesting. It's really pretty cool. I would love to walk on the trail through the canyon that Mr. Pratt describes, who owned this property and lived here. He claimed it's the most beautiful place he'd ever been, ever seen. He was a geologist, and the video was actually really interesting. You should watch that. But it describes that canyon, but it's about a 4-mile walk, and as much as I'd love to walk up into it with rivers and just totally different foliage, Debbie and I just don't think we can because we just walked this other trail. So instead, we're just going to take this short nature trail around just to look at a few things and just spend the rest of the time doing that. But it's something I wish I could do, and if you do it, I hope you enjoy it at the McKittrick Canyon Trail. We're going to complete our tour of Guadalupe National Park. Fascinating park. Wish we had more time here. We didn't get here till about noon, so we were really only able to do one trail. And like I said at the very beginning, when we were down at the south side of El Capitan, this park being relatively new from the 70s, people that come here, people that tend to come back here, come here for the physical activity of the trails primarily. And I wish we could have gone on more trails. This one, for instance, the Smith Spring Trail was fantastic. Like I've mentioned before, you've got to do that one. But if you could get here really early, this McKittrick Canyon Trail would be the one I would want to go see. Unfortunately, we didn't get to do it. I think it's too late in the day for us. But what you see around you here, this dry, arid region of just these mountains, cactus and scrub brush and everything, is nothing at all what you see within these canyons. You get back into these canyons and suddenly there's maple trees and ferns and just beautiful flowers and rivers running through and springs and just nothing like you would expect in this dry and arid desert environment. So this canyon particularly is the geologist explained, Mr. Pratt, who donated this property, is one of the most beautiful places he'd ever seen on Earth. And he was a geologist, and it's full of calcium. The rivers are just full of dissolved carbonate or lime, and those deposits on the stream and just form these rock layers and just fascinating things to see back in that canyon. So I would have loved to have gone back in there. So if you can do the McKittrick Canyon Trail, that's what I do. I definitely do the Smith Spring Trail. That was just absolutely beautiful too, as you've probably seen in the video. So until next time, this is Guadalupe National Park. We enjoyed our time and we're on to the next park. See you next time.